If you're like me, then you absolutely love arcade video games. The success of certain arcade video games have led to the development of sequels, so I thought let's go ahead and uncover some of these arcade sequels that, I didn't even know existed, and you probably didn't know either. Let's start with BombJack Twin. As the title suggests, this is a two-player simultaneous game, and if I had any friends, I could show you that, but I'm just playing it by myself. Honestly, it's not too much different than the original game. You're still jumping around, collecting these bombs, and avoiding enemies. If you collect the power-up, you can actually, attack, defeat, eat, turn your enemies into stars? I don't know. In a sense, it's kind of like Pac-Man, where you can defeat your enemies that way. And it's a good idea to be a little strategic about when you collect that power-up, because the more enemies on the screen means the more you can turn into stars, I guess, and defeat and collect the points for. I do like the backgrounds here, they're pretty cool. There's a castle and a view of the Parthenon from Greece and Tower Bridge in London. Also, there's a Japanese background with some cherry blossoms. So it's nice that there's different backgrounds to keep things interesting. Ultimately, the game doesn't seem too much different from the original, aside from the graphics and the sounds. Next we have faster, harder, more challenging Qbert. And if I'm not mistaken, this was a upgrade kit for the original Qbert. When I did an interview with Warren Davis, he talked about this version of the game, and he really prefers this one over the original. And I can understand why. Basically, you get to advance through the game a little bit faster. Level 1 encapsulates all the different levels from the original game. You know, like where you have to change the color twice, or sometimes the colors will change back when you step on the cube again. One difference I noticed is that the little platforms that you can jump on to move you to the top of the screen, they hop around too, so you have to be a little bit more strategic about when you're going to jump on one. The original Qbert is definitely easier than this one, but if you just want a quick go of it, then probably faster, harder, more challenging Qbert is the way to go. And boy, is that a mouthful. Here's Gaplus, which is the sequel, little-known sequel, to Galaga. A lot of people think that Galaga 90 was the direct sequel to the original Galaga game, but no, it would be this game. A couple things I noticed about it is that it is definitely more difficult than the original Galaga. The graphics are a little bit more refined. I'm sure it's using a different hardware board. Also, if you get hit, the formation of the aliens disappear. You kind of have to start over. And also, I noticed that the enemy has already captured one of your ships. I was never able to actually get that ship back because the alien that's holding it is very hard to reach. Oh, and there's one other feature of this game that is not in just about any other Galaga game, and that's the fact that you can move your ship much closer to the formation. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, though, but yeah, it's something that you can do. But I can understand why this game was not as popular or well known as the original game. I feel like the original game had a much better balance of difficulty and fun. Here we have Golden Axe, the Revenge of Death Adder. This game is amazing. Now, I love the original Golden Axe game, but this sequel just feels, I don't know, more alive than the original game does. First of all, you'll notice that the graphics are absolutely incredible. The animation is great. The hits from your warrior feel really substantial. Oh, and also your character has a special attack move that he can use. The magic attacks are also incredibly awesome. There's also a nice variety of stages and enemies and mounts that you can ride. Like you can jump on this praying mantis here that shoots fire and attack your enemies with it. So here I am riding the praying mantis, and then I'm using this special weapon at the same time. That just cracks me up. One nice thing are the branching paths, and I feel that really increases the replayability of the game. But one thing I don't care for is the walking into the screen. I don't know, it just seems kind of pointless. So yeah, Golden Axe, The Revenge of Death Adder. It's nothing like the Sega Genesis sequels, and honestly, I'm kind of disappointed that this never came out for the Saturn or for any other game system. There was an arcade one-up that came out not too long ago, though. You could play it that way, or just emulation. I would go with emulation. This is definitely one of my more favorite beat-em-up games. Here's Joe and Mac Returns, which is nothing like the original game. That was more of a side-scrolling action game. This is more of a single-screen puzzle game, very similar to Puzzle Bobble. Basically, in the game, you whack your enemies, throw them in a bag, and then you can throw that bag at the other enemies. If you can whack multiple enemies and put them all in a bag, then your bag gets even bigger with the ability to knock out even more enemies. Also, you can collect the fruit for bonus points, and then later on in the game you have to deal with a boss character. I played this game for a while and I got to see quite a few different stages. You've got a volcano jungle stage here at the beginning. Then you have like an ice stage later on. And then I also got to the underwater stage here. Normally I don't like these puzzle bobble kind of games, but this one I really enjoyed. I especially like it when your character says, "I got a power up." Normally I get annoyed by hearing the same thing over and over again, but in this case your character says it with such enthusiasm it just cracks me up. I wanted to hear it all the time. Next we have Joust 2.
Who will challenge me?
And I've actually seen this one at Free Play Florida. I don't know if it was a prototype, or if it was a wide release, or maybe it was an upgrade kit, but I have definitely seen this one. And essentially the game is the same, where the goal is to land on as many enemies as possible, knock the eggs out of them, collect the eggs to prevent them from turning into more warriors that you have to defeat. Some of the differences here are that the stages change every time, and as you can see the graphics on the stages are way more detailed. Also, you can collect a red egg, which gives you the ability to choose your bonus. But probably the biggest difference is that you can turn into a Pegasus, which can be helpful in defeating some enemies that are a little bit more powerful. The only problem with that is that Pegasus cannot fly quite as easily as your regular ostrich can. I got pretty far into the game and I actually got to the boss here. And what you have to do here on this boss is hit all these little buttons on each the four sides. And when you do that, he kind of collapses on himself. It's actually a little anticlimactic. Oh, and then here's a stage where I'm battling these little crystal bats. So there's a lot of variety in the game, that's for sure, and I don't know if it's for the better. It seems like most of it is just a bunch of nonsense. Here's a game called Kicker, which I think is also known as Shaolin's Road, and I think this is a sequel or semi-sequel or a spiritual sequel to Yair Kung Fu. I've never been sure of that pronunciation. So basically in the game your goal is to run around and kick enemies. If you kick the guys in the green pants, you'll knock out a special bonus. Most of the time I wasn't able to get it though. One thing I liked about the game is that you have 3 hits before you get knocked out. One hit deaths just bother me. So if you notice, all the enemies have the same basic pattern. They jump down, then they jump back up, they jump back up again. So you kind of get an idea of how to defeat these guys. Now the first stage is a little bit boring to look at, but the second stage is really cool. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to last very long on this stage. Oh, yeah, there I got the power up. And I'm dead. This was a pretty good one, I like this game. Here we have Marble Madness 2, Marble Man. And I believe this was a prototype that was never actually released, but a couple of years ago, some friends of Free Play Florida were able to convert the game into an FPGA system, and they actually have a real Marble Madness arcade machine, and I even have a poster that they signed for me. Some differences between this and the original game is that number one, it's much harder. Number two, your marble has a little bit more personality, and he has a face sometimes, which, I don't know, it's kind of weird. Also, the controls of the game don't use a trackball, they use joysticks, which I guess joysticks are much cheaper than trackballs and probably easier to work with. But the goal of the game is still the same, and literally that's what you do, is just get to the goal at the end of the stage, before the time runs out, of course. There's definitely some wacky aspects to this version of the game, and it seems like they threw the kitchen sink at it. Alright, here's Operation Thunderbolt, which is the sequel to Operation Wolf.
Operation Thunderbolt.
Now I think this one might be a little bit more known than some of the other games on this list. But for me, I always see Operation Wolf everywhere, and you know there was the Nintendo game, so Operation Thunderbolt kind of gets forgotten, at least to me. There was a port for the Super Nintendo along with the Atari ST, Commodore 64, Amiga, and a bunch of other computers, so I don't know, maybe you haven't seen this game. The main difference, though, is that you're kind of running into the screen versus going side to side, shooting your enemies. At least that's the first stage. The second stage is more of a traditional left to right Operation Wolf style game. I think this one is an improvement over Operation Wolf in that it's much faster paced and there's a lot more variety in the game. Also, it seemed a little easier, but that just might be me. Alright, here's a game called Osman, and I don't think this is a direct sequel to Strider, but it's more of a spiritual sequel kind of thing. It plays almost exactly like Strider, that's for sure. The wall climbing is basically the same, the attacks are basically the same, you can do the slide just like Strider. One could argue that the setting is also the same. I mean, it's kind of in a futuristic world, but yet familiar all at the same time. But maybe more Middle Eastern than Strider. This one has a lot of different settings and some incredible graphics. I like this setting here where you're out on the ocean, and you have to battle through this ship here. This is pretty cool. And then later you get to fight on this very raging ocean. You also get to take on some robots and things like that. Very cool game. Here's Peter Pepper's Ice Cream Factory, the sequel to Burger Time. And in this game, your goal is to get the ice cream balls into the ice cream cones, which is easier said than done. I found myself dying way more often than I should have, I think. The enemies are really just relentless in this one. They don't give you a chance, really, but fortunately you can jump over them, so it makes it a little bit easier. The problem is if you screw up, like get the ice cream on the wrong platform or something, trying to get it back into the cone is very difficult. You can kick it upwards, but when you have these enemies that are constantly on your tail, you don't even get a chance to get the ice cream where it needs to go. I found this game to be way harder than the original, and honestly, not very fun. Not very fun at all. Here we have Primal Rage 2. It's supposedly the sequel to the original Primal Rage, where you battle as dinosaurs, but in this one, you're fighting as humans. I don't know if that works. I mean, sure, you can turn into the dinosaur for a brief moment, but you're not playing as them for the whole game. I don't know how you can call it Primal Rage when you're barely even playing as a dinosaur. That said, though, this game is pretty fun. The animation is very, very good. I would say it's the best for any fighting game I have ever seen. I mean, just look how smooth it is. Okay, sure, the characters look very rubbery and fake. I'm sure they were just action figures that they modified. Which makes me wonder, where are these figures anyway? Who owns them? Does anybody own the original Primal Rage dinosaur characters? Where are they? Anyway, there is a video out there that explains the creation of this game and why it never was released. Essentially, it's because Atari Games got bought by Midway, and they didn't want it competing with Mortal Kombat 3 or 4 or whichever Mortal Kombat game they had out at the time. But in this video that I will leave down in the description, it explains everything and shows the creation of an actual arcade Primal Rage 2 game. Despite the game's minimal inclusion of the dinosaurs, I still find this game to be pretty fun. Qbert Qubes. Another sequel to Qbert? I mean, you can never have too many sequels to Qbert, right? The playstyle is quite a bit different than the original game and in the faster, harder, more challenging Qbert. The goal here is to jump on the cube and rotate it to look like the target cube up in the top left. If you get 5 cubes in a row rotated the correct way, then you'll get to go on to the next stage. It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty fun once you get the hang of it. And in certain ways, this game is a little bit easier than the original game. Mostly because Coily the snake isn't in it constantly chasing you around the stage. There is a rat who will appear if you take too long, though. Now, there is an Atari 2600 version of this game, which is extremely rare and valuable, so if you happen to see it, definitely pick it up. Here's Spy Hunter 2. This game is, I don't know, a mess. I'm sure it works better on real hardware, but in this game, it didn't seem like my gas pedal was working that well. My car kept stopping and slowing down. This game tries to do this 3D style look to it, and honestly, it just doesn't work. It doesn't have the real energy of the original game. It feels kind of boring, kind of dull, but that might just be because the programmer was trying to ease the player into the gameplay. I don't know. But I do find fascinating that it follows that same Midway style from back in the day. Kind of has that same look about it as games like Rampage or Arch Rivals or Timber. Makes me wonder, did Brian Collin work on this game? I'll have to ask him next time I see him. Anyway, I wasn't all that thrilled with this one. Strider 2. Now this one is the genuine sequel to the original Strider game, and as you can see, it uses a 3D background with 2D sprite characters. And I really think it works. Gameplay is incredibly fun though. I think I enjoyed this way more than the original Strider. This game also appeared on the PlayStation, and I understand it was a pretty easy port since the arcade hardware is very similar. Some pretty neat set pieces here too. In this one here, you battle on the outside of a floating spaceship. Unfortunately, I don't have any space horses to help me out here. It's a little challenging trying to get up here. The wind is constantly blowing me back. This is a pretty awesome game. I really love the graphic style and the gameplay. Alright, here's another Burger Time sequel. This one's called Super Burger Time. This is more of a traditional knock down the burger patties game. Although in this one you actually have to stomp on the patties and the buns and the tomato slices and all that stuff. You can't just walk over them like in the original game. Sometimes that can be a bit of a problem because if there's a platform above your character, you might jump up on that platform instead of jumping on the bun. Also, I noticed there's some larger enemies in the game like this pea-pod. You do have to be careful how you deal with those pea-pods though. You can't just walk above them and hope to skip past them because they do extend above the platform and they'll still get you that way, which, I don't know, I find that to be a little unfair. Later stages have giant burgers which take 5 stomps to knock the parts down instead of just 3. And then lastly, let's talk about stage 2.1, which is the first one with this candy style look to it. Now the real problem with the stage is that there's this one ladder that goes right through the middle of it, and as the enemies continuously populate, it's practically impossible to get up there to the burger parts that you have to knock down. So basically what I'm saying is that I think stage 2.1 is just completely unfair. Here's Super Zaxxon, which is the faster, harder, more challenging version of the original Zaxxon game. I mean, it's definitely faster. And in this one, you go through a tunnel instead of into outer space, which means you can't really move up and down that much, making it more challenging to avoid the enemy planes. If you can get to the end of the second part of the stage, then you get to fight a little dragon guy instead of a robot. Apparently there's a lot of ports of Super Zaxxon, Atari 8-bit, Commodore 64, Apple II, and the IBM PC version. But really the original game just completely overshadows this one. Here's Tempest Tubes, and this is exactly like the original Tempest game, except with different playfields. Much more difficult playfields, let me add. I mean, a couple of these are pretty normal, they're just circular, so it's not too challenging. Here's another one that's kind of circular. And as you can see now, they're starting to get a little bit more challenging with this weird design. Then you get to this one where it's so squished you can't even really see what the heck's going on. And then this one I feel like it was intentionally made to confuse you. And this one here has me curious. What does that look like to you in profile? Now, I'm not sure, but this just may be a hack of the original Tempest. I don't think there were any arcade cabinets produced with this, nor do I think this game was meant to be distributed as like a ROM chip upgrade or something like that. But as you can see, it's exactly the same as the original Tempest, just with different boards. Terra Cresta, which is a sequel to Moon Cresta, which was basically just like a Galaxian clone. And this one definitely improves on the original game. This one has you flying over different terrains, shooting enemies in the sky and also on the ground. You can get different weapons by shooting the numbers on the ground. If you have one of those special weapons and you get hit, you just lose the special weapon. So it's kind of nice that it isn't a one-hit death. I like the dinosaur enemy because when you shoot them, they turn into a skeleton. If you're able to survive to the end, you get to fight this boss character, which I couldn't defeat because this game is hard. Alright, here's Thunder Jaws, which in my mind is a spiritual sequel to Rolling Thunder. Of course, Rolling Thunder was by Namco, and this one is by Atari Games, so kind of different developers too. In this one, the goal is to defeat the James Bond-style supervillain who has a lair underwater. So you have to swim to the lair first, avoiding sharks and bombs and enemy scuba divers and things like that. And then once you get into the base, you'll see the obvious similarities to Rolling Thunder. You do have to defeat a boss at the end, and I was lucky to just barely squeak by defeating this submarine boss thing. Got pretty lucky there.
Excellent.
And I guess we get to see what this supervillain looks like. And oh my gosh, she's got a lot of red hair.
Your feeble attempts amuse me.
This one's got a lot of different enemies. The one enemy I don't care for, these little spider guys, they always jump at me and I end up losing some health over it. But hey, if you like Rolling Thunder and maybe Sly Spy, then you probably like Thunderjaws. It's pretty good, but also extremely challenging in the second stage. Truxton 2. This is a vertically scrolling spaceship shooter. Naturally, it's the sequel to one of the most popular shooting games of all time. But this is another one I had no idea there was a sequel for. I think the graphics in this game are much improved over the original, and I definitely like the music. And I really love some of the weapons. This blue one here is my favorite because it just like auto-targets the enemies. But what I don't care for are the one-hit deaths. Because when you die, you have to start back at a checkpoint. And most of the time my checkpoint is at the beginning of the stage, which sucks. Fortunately, you do have an improved super bomb which will scroll upwards on the screen, and I had to use that numerous times just to get myself out of a jam. I mean, I wasn't just using it to defeat the bosses or anything, I was using it to just stay alive. Definitely a harder version of the original game, but still quite a bit of fun. Here we have Turbo Outrun, which as you can see is very similar to the original Outrun game. Although this time, you have a turbo boost button, so you can make your car go even faster and flip over even further. This one features quite a few different stages, like the original. I mean, we have this nice forest stage where, I don't know, it looks like I'm driving through upstate New York or something. Although, why are there so many barricades all over the road? Then we have this stage where we're driving through the snow. And then another stage here where we're on Mars, apparently. And then we also have this stage where we're driving through the city. And I guess through Texas because there's oil all over the road which catches on fire. I'm not sure that one's right though. Like I said, you can use a turbo, but you have to be judicious with it because if you overuse it, your car will overheat. One thing I thought was pretty funny is that here at the beginning of stage 5, my girlfriend gets out of the car and then goes over to the other car. Was I such a terrible driver the first 4 stages? Yeah, probably. So what this actually did was make me want to drive faster because I wanted to get to, I guess, stage 9 and see if she'll get back into the car with me. Although I couldn't do it, I sucked. But that was just a little bit of psychology there. I was probably a much more reckless driver from this point forward because I was trying to beat that other car. But I gotta say, I really did enjoy this game. Maybe even more than the original. Vindicators Part II. And basically the way I understand it is that this game is just like the original tank game, only with a few different stages and only 10 of them instead of 14. That said, I've always enjoyed this game. I like piloting a tank and blasting other enemy tanks. The controls can be a little bit weird because the arcade cabinet requires 2 joysticks, just like a real tank. This game does get hard really quickly, which is a little bit different than the original game, which starts you off a little easier. I've always enjoyed the original version of this game. I mean, I even have it for the original Nintendo. Lastly, we have Warrior Blade Rastan Saga 3, which of course is the sequel to Rastan Saga 2, which is the sequel to Rastan. Where Rastan Saga 2 was an abysmal sequel, Rastan Saga 3 is incredible. And yes, I'm trying to see how many times I can say Rastan in 30 seconds. This one's a little bit unique because it has a dual screen setup, which is kind of cool, and I think a much better use of a dual screen than a game like, say, Punch-Out! You play as Rastan, who is a Conan the Barbarian style warrior with a giant sword as his main weapon. You can also play as Sophia, who has a whip, which I don't find to be nearly as effective as the sword. Or you can play as Dewey, who has dual knives. I guess that's why it's Dewey, dual. I just got that this very instant. Duh. I don't find him to be very good either. This game is so good, especially if you like hack and slash games. There's a large variety of stages, and they're all extremely detailed. Not to mention the fact that you have a lot of creepy bosses to deal with. The first boss is the skeleton guy, which is extremely creepy. And then you've got this Lord of the Rings style octopus thing coming out of the water. And then you got this giant plant here which looks like a snake. And then this fire demon looking thing right here. Ugh. That screeching that they make is, I don't know, it just creeps me out. This is a huge improvement over both the original Rastan games. And I'm really sad that I only just learned about this one, because man, this game is a lot of fun. Alright, well there you have it, a bunch of arcade game sequels that you may or may not have known existed. My main takeaway from playing all these games is that it seems that most of these games are just more difficult with more enemies and stuff thrown at the player. Anyway, that's my take on some of these arcade sequels. What is your thoughts on these games? Please let me know down in the comments. With all that said, I want to thank you for watching, take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye everyone.